Hello everyone, my name is Aurelia Lucaite and I am from Hermeta Solutions company. Hermeta Solutions is a security solutions distributor, and every month we organize security webinars about different security topics. Today, our guest is Julie from Clearswift's company. She will look today at the advanced DLP features as adaptive data loss prevention, data redaction, document sanitization, and encryption. If you have any questions during webinar, write them straight to the chat, and at the end of the webinar, we will try to answer them all. By the way, every one of you are muted, and you can ask questions only in the chat or also write them directly to info@hermetage.lt. So have a good webinar, and I am giving a word to Julie.
Hi everyone, my name is Julie Jolibois and I'm a pre-sales engineer here at Clearswift. In this session we will look at how you can use your adaptive data loss prevention solutions to adopt a practical and achievable approach to DLP with GDPR in mind, knowing that the General Data Protection Regulation is coming in May 2018, so next year, and will require a level of data privacy and security that really steps up from how organizations are dealing with DLP at the moment. Clearswift can help your organization comply with GDPR with an unprecedented level of real-time data visibility, intelligent policy enforcement, and adaptive security. You can use the Clearswift suite of products to enable your organization to communicate and collaborate securely, safe in the knowledge that none of your critical information is inappropriately exposed to people inside or outside your organization. So just to give you a little bit of background on Clearswift, Clearswift is a global cybersecurity company headquartered in the UK with offices in the US, Australia, Germany, and Japan. In over 20 years of developing our deep content inspection engine, we have become experts in understanding the data, in breaking it down into its tiniest component parts, in applying policies against it to check whether it is acceptable or non-acceptable, and putting the data back together. This has led us to create our cutting-edge adaptive DLP technology, which we will talk about, which has been recognized and rewarded globally. We have over 2,500 customers across the globe, predominantly in the defense, government, and finance domains, and they are trusting us with their very sensitive data, such as the military, police, and central banks. So here's the agenda for today. We will first look at the current challenges the organizations are facing with DLP and see how Clearswift solutions can help with building a DLP policy, get visibility of the critical information, and to see how the data flows in and out of the organization. Organizations are facing different kinds of challenges nowadays. Let's start by listing the risks organizations face these days. Typically, when you talk about data breaches, we think of a number of groups. So you've got external people attacking an organization to gain access to its critical information, or you've got malicious insiders, such as Edward Snowden, for example. And you've got your own employees as well. Employees who can be well-intentioned, like they didn't realize they were exchanging more information than they should have. Employees who might not be up to date on your latest policies as well, or are just so busy and become just negligent. And you need to remember that employees are only humans and they make mistakes. On top of the different attacks that can be made towards the organization, there are also regulations that you need to comply with. Regulations that have been put in place to ensure organizations are doing something against data breaches. The most talked about at the moment being GDPR, obviously, which we'll be looking at as part of also building a DLP policy with the Clearswift solutions. There are really four questions before you begin one of those DLP projects. What is your sensitive data? Where is it stored? Where is it meant to be stored? USB drives, mail stores, file servers, databases, etc. Who can have access to the critical information and who should have access to it? It's easier to give everyone access to the data, otherwise it generates too many calls to the IT help desk because of false positives, but that opens a huge amount of risk. So how should the sensitive data be shared or used, and how should it not be used and shared, both inside and outside the organization? And if you don't know the answers to these questions, how can you actively protect the critical information or sensitive data? And better than stopping the data flow, can you just remove the sensitive information from the communications to avoid an interruption of the business? Traditional DLP projects have fallen down in the past because they imposed too many barriers in the business communication and had to create too many bypasses to compensate the blockages. So what is your critical information? You have to go and find out what information you're holding within your databases, your mail stores, your file servers, etc. You need to identify what is critical to your information, what information is sensitive. You need to go and do that research to find out how you're going to be able to protect it. So where is that critical information? How are the users sharing that information? Do they use external solutions like things in the cloud, like OneDrive, Google Mail, home devices, laptops, computers, USB sticks, anything? We need to look at the flow. What are the communication channels? And where is information stored? Then you need to find out who has got access to the data. We need to follow the information going inside and outside the organization. Who is exchanging or accessing what data? What applications are used? What processes are currently in place? Etc. etc. Sit down with your teams and map the data flow. Then turn it into a non-intrusive monitoring policy so you can just check what you think is happening and what is actually happening, so that then after you can build the policy. What can you put in place very quickly to start helping as well? Don't turn this project into a very long one, taking years of analyzing the data and years to implement policies. Start applying and enforcing some policies straight away. It's best to put something in place up front, make sure you're on the road to compliance, and then tweak the policy on top of that. When we are looking at the GDPR process, there are several key points. You need to, and that applies to DLP as well, obviously. You need to identify a champion within your organization who is going to drive it forward, because compliance can be seen as a very huge burden. So you really want your champion to be someone who's driving from the top down. So it's going to be your CEO or someone very senior in the management team. They're going to be your go-to person in terms of discovery, implementation, and they're going to be the one who will stick to compliance procedures. We can use external experts to help accelerate the GDPR or DLP initiative. They can help you inform you as to where to focus your project. You also need to appoint a data protection officer in the case of GDPR. Their role is to look at the organization from the side of the regulator with the end user's interest at heart as well, or the customer or the European citizen in the case of GDPR, for example. Some organizations will use an existing employee, like a CISO, a CIO, or some IT directors, but smaller organizations can actually share the DPO role between employees. You don't need to have a DPO in place to start. You can already look at the organization and do some discovery. You don't need to wait to start the project. You can start small. Once you've got the people identified and in place, you can start to look at the policies and the processes that you need to put in place. But first, you need to identify the critical data for the organization and how it flows internally and outside the organization. You need to identify the tools used to communicate and store the data. You also need to cater for breach processes. Under GDPR, for example, there is a breach notification that is required. So you will need to make a notification to the data protection authorities within 24 hours of a breach of personal identifiable information. Also, for example, me as a European citizen, I have a right to ask your organization to remove all of my data from your servers. So you will need to know where the data lives to be able to achieve my request. You need to look at the shadow IT side of things as well. There might be some tools that your users use to communicate information that you have no idea they're using, but you will need to know about them in order to either protect them or to replace them with your own tools. And there is no single silver bullet. You can look at enforcing your procedures, but you need to have something in place in case a mistake happens, because as remember, everyone is human. So there needs to be a second line of protection here. You need to ensure that the data is being shared securely with DLP and encryption policies. And you need to be able to report on the data for compliancy to know what has happened or what has not happened. And like all cycle processes, you need to constantly review the processes in place to improve based on your experience or on your testing. And once you've gone through the whole process, you can start filling in the gaps and add processes or technologies in place to back that up.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I understand.
We can prioritize our channels. We can look at the endpoint, the data at rest, where the data lives within the organization, and also remove it from the unappropriated locations. We can look at the email and the web traffic entering and leaving the organization. If you try to do everything at once, you might have difficulties. So you will need to look at prioritizing the information. What is the sensitive data? Is it PCI? Is it PII? Credit card numbers? Anything like that. But also, what is critical to the organization? It's the products that you create, the information that you store about your staff. It's also the intellectual property. So what will impact the day-to-day business processes with that critical information? Who can share what information? Once you've got that kind of understanding and you can put the enforcement in place, then you can switch the policy on. Well, because you've taken the time to do the discovery, when you go live, the false positives are much fewer. The management overhead is much lesser because it is a much more reasonable approach where you ensure continuous collaboration. And obviously, that also reduces the frustrations of your end users. Now, we're going to look at how Clearswift can help you build your DLP policy. With the Clearswift solutions, there is a number of areas that we can fit in and help you. We're not everywhere, but we're trying to be as everywhere as we can. We have email and web solutions that will sit at the boundary of the organization and that will check that your users are entitled to share the sensitive data according to your DLP policy or to GDPR or any other kind of regulations as well. We have solutions that will deploy within the organization, like our Exchange gateway that will plug to the Exchange server and that will look at all the internal email traffic so as to avoid breaches inside the organization. Because although internal recipients can delete what they should not have received, they would need to report the violation so it can be logged and recorded and investigated. We have our endpoint solutions, which can look at the data in use when users copy data to external medias like USB sticks or burn information to DVDs. But you can also deal with the data at rest and the discovery side of your DLP to know where the sensitive data resides within the organization, where it should live, and take measures to remediate and move the data to a more secure location. We have our information governance server, which can help you with a track and trace, and which will help you gain visibility into how the data is being shared, and also gives you the ability to do some of the investigation if you have a breach, and where you will need to go back and prove to the board what did or did not occur. So to tell you a bit more about our products, I'm going to go into lots of details in this session because there's a lot of our products. So please contact us if you've got any questions or if you would like to know more. But basically, this diagram is to give you an idea of what is available inside our products. The core of the product is the deep content inspection engine, which will just break the data down and will be able to analyze each part of the communication. We can then apply policies around the hygiene, like the anti-spam or anti-malware solutions. We can encrypt the communications through different channels like PGP, SMIME, TLS, portal-based encryption, etc. We can plug into Active Directory, and also all of our products offer reporting solutions. We can also, on top of that, remove the critical information and the potential threats from email or web communications with our adaptive redaction modules, which we'll be looking into in more details later on. All of our solutions can be deployed in an appliance form, either on hardware or virtual platforms, or we can deploy in the cloud as well, with Microsoft Azure, Amazon Cloud, etc. When we talk about DLP, we need to ensure the rules put in place are consistent across all channels and throughout the whole organization. All of our products can be paired together so as to provide a consistent policy across all channels. So we're talking about the web, email, and endpoints. And although the policy is consistent, you can also have different actions being applied to different traffic. This is where you need to think about the different scenarios in which the data will be transferred from one person to another. You might want to block some of the content, but some other content might just have to be redacted so as to anonymize the information before it is shared. You can also decide what critical information sent between specific entities is allowed, but should be encrypted as it leaves the organization. The flexibility is really there. So DLP is not easy to implement. It does take a long time to be active, and it can be very expensive to purchase and to configure. It can take months or even years of external consultants' time before they become truly effective. For it to reach the protection phase of the project, it can take a lot longer than you had originally planned. It is often pushed back as a scale of issues just become apparent. Most of the time, DLP will just block the whole transmission as it is set to stop and block, and delays valid business communication because of this. It produces a large manual processing overhead with a large amount of false positives that have an impact on the productivity of your users. Because of that, users and management get frustrated by the policies in place and ask for bypasses, which then create chaos from a compliance point of view. And then, even with that, hidden sensitive information can still be missed as it is present in the metadata. And of course, DLP needs to cover all channels, so email, web, USB drives, etc. As the technology moves on, We too need to cater for all the changes. New technologies such as Dropbox, OneDrive, social networking, medias, etc. are some of the new ways to share information and exchange data. You cannot just block all those kinds of communication nowadays. You need to allow them to be used, but in a very controlled way, where you still have control over what is being exchanged and who with. We need to ensure that a DLP policy is in place, but that we do not block the whole communication and impact the business. 4 or 5 years ago, we developed a number of key modules to achieve a less intrusive approach to DLP. It's about understanding the risk behind the communication flow, the email traffic, the web traffic, or the endpoint, but rather than blocking the whole communication because there is something that contravenes the policy, instead, what we do is that we strip the risk from the communication and we let the communication continue without interrupting the business and while maintaining productivity and security. We are now going to look at where Clearswift's adaptive DLP can help so as not to become a barrier to business communications. There is a lot you can do with our products, and I am only merely focusing on what differentiates us from other vendors. More can be said about the products and their functionalities, and this is something I would be more than happy to discuss with you over another session if you would like. It all starts around our deep content inspection engine, which is built in all of our products. It is our ability to take a document and decompose it until we get to the end of it. Here, for example, you have an executable file, so from right to left, you've got an executable file which is embedded in an Excel table, which was added into a Word document, which itself is compressed in a zip file. So we are able to see every component parts of a file, and we can drill down up to 200 levels as well. So as part of our adaptive DLP modules, one of them is document sanitization. So document sanitization is all about preventing data harvesting. The gateway detects and removes document properties, revision histories, comments, etc., from Microsoft Office documents, OpenOffice, or PDF files. It can do this either completely or in a selected manner. After all, there may be some properties that you want to keep in the documents because, for example, you use classification of documents. So as documents pass through our systems, the metadata can be removed automatically and consistently. It's all about removing the information that you might not know is there, such as the name of the network printer, the author name, the version of Windows, the version of the software that was used to create the document, the network path, the commands, the version, revision histories, the autosave data, etc., etc., etc. That hidden data is a vector for attackers using social engineering to target your organization. By removing it, you protect the sensitive information leaving your company, and you also prevent human error. So, for example, here on the right, you can see a document that a user was thinking of sending. So that's basically what is on the screen. But if you look now at this page, that is what is behind the document. That's all the metadata, all the comments that were exchanged with other colleagues, all the paragraphs or phrases that were removed. It's all that information that is still saved within the documents. So what the gateways can do is remove that data so that whatever your user was seeing on the screen is what they are actually sending. Structural sanitization is one of the other modules. It is here to prevent targeted attacks with active code embedded within Microsoft documents, OpenOffice, PDF files, etc. What you have to know is that even with sandboxing, even with antiviruses or zero-hour malware detection, active code can still get through to your users. It can be because the antivirus doesn't know about a virus yet, or because the code is simply not a virus. It can be a targeted attack. Although our products can simply block the content altogether, This can create false positives and obviously overhead for your IT team. With structural sanitization, you can remove what might be malicious and let the traffic through, so as not to block the business communication completely. The gateway will automatically strip the active code for you. In the example on screen, you can see some lines of code that have been added to a Microsoft Office file. With structural sanitization, you can automatically remove that code and only let the data through. Although this feature was originally designed around inbound targeted attacks, it is also very useful from a DLP point of view for outbound traffic, where you can prevent the loss of intellectual property in the form of code. It is better if that code is stripped before it leaves the organization. Last thing is that in the example of emails, the recipient of the file might block the active content already on their side. So from a business perspective, by removing active code on outbound traffic, you make sure your email is getting to the recipient and is not blocked by the recipient's gateway solution. So the final module is our data redaction. So our products can detect sensitive information and replace it with asterisks. The data redaction is triggered by lexical analysis. You can, for example, look for profanity or credit card numbers, patient IDs for hospitals, serial numbers, account numbers, etc., etc., etc. So basically any kind of patterns or even specific data coming from your own databases. The redacted document is delivered, human errors are eliminated, as the process is completely automated, and this can work for either incoming or outgoing traffic. The redaction of text within emails, Microsoft Office, OpenOffice, PDF, or RTF files, is beneficial in many ways. You can remove your critical sensitive information from outgoing traffic as part of your DLP policy. Financial institutions can remove the PCI information from emails coming in and out as well to ensure they are PCI compliant, which is very useful when you think of, again, the GDPR regulation. You can also remove profanity from inbound traffic to protect your staff from upsetting comments that could have an impact on their mental health, for example. In the example you can see on screen, the user is trying to send an email containing credit card information, and the gateway has been set up to detect card patterns through lexical analysis, and after it recognizes the text, it replaces it with stars. And we can take it a step further by using your own live data rather than just detecting patterns. So let me show that to you. So we can target the search of lexical information using your own data sources. This option offers improved DLP capabilities in these that the records are easier to maintain as they come from an existing database. It reduces the amount of false positives, and it is a method to detect PCI and PII data with greater confidence. The confidential data is safely stored, and it can support for up to 10 million items. In this example, we are looking at live data from the patient's database, and we are able to detect the actual name of the patient and their ID number so as to redact the information before it is sent out. All of our solutions are able to understand not only the content of the traffic, but also the context. So who that data has been shared between and what mechanisms have been used in order to share it. You can, for example, define how the data can be shared with external recipients and automatically encrypt it before it leaves the organization boundary, because it might contain some personal identifiable information, for example. A certain person from HR, for example, is able to log into a portal and upload payroll spreadsheets, but if they go to their website and they try to upload the same document with the same data, they would be stopped from doing so. And if they try to copy that document again to an external USB drive, we can either block the upload, unless they have a specific business reason for doing so, and in that case, we can force the data to be encrypted before it is moved to the USB stick. And there is granularity that is available to really enable you to tailor your policy to meet the needs of your organization. We often think of DLP as an outgoing traffic solution, but this works both ways. You need to look at the data coming in and leaving the organization, and you also need to cater for the information being shared between the individuals inside the organization. You also need to be mindful that targeted attacks will aim at your critical information, so you need to block the threats before they reach your users. So you really need to think of inbound, outbound, and within the organization when you do DLP or GDPR. So now, what about the endpoint? I'm going to give you a few ideas as to how it would work for you. When talking about DLP, organizations have to look at all communication channels made available to users. The most commonly looked at filter are the web and email channels, but we also need to look at where the data resides and how it gets moved to external drives, for example. You see a lot of breaches in the news where critical information was put on a USB drive or onto a DVD and information got lost. The Clearswift endpoint solution lets you decide which kind of information can be moved to an external drive. You can block the upload, you can apply encryption to the document, and on top of this, you can also notify the compliance officer, the manager, the auditors, etc. As well as this, you can get a pop-up to display a reminder of the policy that users are contravening, so as to educate them. So there are several options available. You can let the user copy the data while giving a reason for this. So it can be recorded and reported to the adequate entities in the organization. Or you can block and educate the users when they contravene the policy. So several options are available for you to tailor the policy according to what is required within your organization. The endpoint solution also lets you check where the critical information resides, as you can perform regular scans of the user's computers and of your servers. You can also enforce a policy to ensure that the critical data is indeed stored where it should be and not elsewhere. So now we're going to move on to the information governance. With the governance phase, part of it is helping the whole organization realize DLP and GDPR, and it's everyone's responsibility. It needs to be a continued process. You can use an information governance server, which is one of our products, to plug into your email and web solutions. So that would be the email gateway, the web gateway, or the Argon server, or the ICAP gateway. And that will give you the kind of ongoing visibility and reporting that you need as part of that governance phase. So the information governance server cannot be used on its own. It needs to be plugged into gateways to provide visibility of how the information is moving and to enforce protection policy. Our IGS server, for short, can peer with our email and web gateways to understand how the information is being shared and to ensure it is shared appropriately. So that's why it is in the middle of that diagram. Our solutions can easily look for traditional keywords or expressions or patterns within the documents. They can plug into live data using lexical qualifiers, as we have seen earlier. With the information governance server, you can go even further than that, and you can classify entire documents so as to ensure that the critical information is shared appropriately within the organization or with third parties as well. That information, either the whole document or just parts of it, can then be tracked and traced. So first, with the IGS, you need to register the data. So the IGS will generate hashes of the whole document and of partial fragments as well. The content is unpacked and checksums are created so we can later either match the full document or just parts of it if they've been copy-pasted, like paragraphs in an email, for example. The source files are not saved on the IGS. It only does checksums. That's all that is recorded on that server. When the information is recorded, the user can classify the documents to decide whether the information is, for example, top secret, secret, confidential, public, etc., etc. So once the data is registered, you can specify the actions to be carried out when the registered data is being discovered through email or internet traffic. With your web and email policies, you can treat the information differently by blocking the communications, blocking the upload, stripping the document from the communication, redacting or anonymizing the text that was found. You have really flexibility here. And on top of that, you can also inform the document owner in the case of IGS, or the auditors, or the IT managers, the managers, etc., etc. And as I mentioned earlier, the gateway can detect partial information from the document that was originally registered. So for example, here you would see a paragraph that has been copied pasted in an email. So we can find out that that paragraph has been added, we can inform the document owner, and then you can redact the text or you can just block the email. From a role perspective, there are several roles available from a governance point of view, and within all of our products as well. So the IG administrator, so the information governance administrator, is responsible for deploying the IGS and ensuring that it remains operational day to day. That person doesn't have access to others' registry or the reporting data. Then you've got the document owner. It is someone that wants to use the IGS to protect certain documents. So they just upload the document and checksums are being created. The compliance officer is a person ultimately responsible for ensuring that important information is not communicated inappropriately. Then you've got the gateway administrator, which is responsible for deploying the gateways, ensuring that they are operational and dealing with policy violations. So that person can view the violations on the gateways. It can also access the quarantine areas, but for example, it might not have access to the IGS itself. So it's really from a policy point of view. And then you've got the end user, who is just the sender or receiver of emails or just a web user. So you can really define who does what with the products and who can do what kind of actions. So all of our products provide reporting. The IGS here lets you investigate incidents to understand how the data is being shared, and that kind of information can be restricted to certain user roles, as we've seen earlier. The Clearswift IGS client application allows users to register as well and classify confidential material from their Windows computers. So they've got a little tool running in the background, and they can just select a document and register it with the IGS server so that checksums are being created. So it's very easy to get them to do that job themselves. So now, as I mentioned earlier, all of our products offer reporting capabilities. So either in the form of actual reports, so as I said, all products have got a reporting menu. Or reporting can also be by notifying users or auditors, compliance officers, etc. by email. I'm not going to tell you everything about the products, what the products can do and what kind of reporting you can do, but I'm going to show you some examples of how far you can go with the products to notify management and compliance officers as to what is happening within the organization, so that can give you an idea of how to customize the policy afterwards to best achieve your goals as an organization. So all of the reports can be viewed as they are from the Gateways interface, or they can be customized as well. And you can also schedule them to run at specific times of days and to be emailed to specific addresses. So it is very flexible here, and not everyone has got to have access to the web interface of the product to be able to receive a report. You can just schedule them so that any manager might be able to receive just the report and nothing else. From an email point of view here, we do offer personal message management like many other vendors, where users can receive a PMM digest listing all of the emails that they've received and that have been placed in quarantine. They can access a PMM portal as well to view and release their emails. But to build your DLP policy, you might want to also block the communication temporarily and to inform the user's manager so the manager can decide whether to release or not the message. This way, you kind of push the responsibility back onto the management rather than the IT help desk having to go and look at the message and finding everything that might be wrong with it when they might not know what the critical information is about. So you can really push that back to the users and their managers so that because at the end of the day, everyone is responsible in DLP projects. So as well as that kind of function where the manager has to be the person responsible to say yes or no the email can be released, you can also enforce a policy where users have to CC their managers in any kind of communication, otherwise it is done for them automatically. So the idea is that the gateways are able to plug onto your Active Directory solution to find out who the manager of the user is and to enforce the policy where the manager's email address is CC'd in the email. From a web traffic point of view this time, you might also want to control what information your users share through webmail by configuring a policy where you can be very granular and block or redact, again, the critical information they might be trying to send out. So that policy can be very similar to the one you created for your email traffic. And remember that you can peer the gateways together to share a consistent policy across all communication channels. So for example, you could share a common list of terms or expressions or even documents that might or not be allowed through webmail or through the SMTP traffic and what can be shared with specific recipients. Again, on the web side of things, you can control which sites can be accessed or not and who should have access to them. So you can be very specific and very granular into what you want to do. You can also control when users can access those websites with a time-based policy, or you can say they can only browse it for a specific amount of time or according to a browsing quota. So our web products will let you configure social media policies for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, all the main social networking kind of sites, but you can also create your own web policies as well. So the policy can be very granular. For example, you might have marketing and HR that have got greater freedom to do jobs compared to other users, and therefore they will have access to some websites that others will not have access to, or they will be able to upload documents that other users might not have, might not be able to. So it's really flexible so that you can prevent data leaks, because on social media, sadly, once it's out there, it's out there. So you can't really do anything. But you can also block, obviously, malware, as it's an increasingly being used as an attack vector. And because users are not as security conscious when they're on social media compared to other sites. So now, just give an idea on GDPR as to where we can sit. There are a lot of areas to look into as part of the GDPR project, and we can help with our solutions for most of those areas. We can't do everything, but we can help around the discovery, the tracking, the encryption, the DLP controls around the endpoint, the governance as well. So some of those areas are around the discovery, to find out where the sensitive information lives within the organization, and some of it is around how you're going to gather the consents that people are giving to us to handle and store the data. Some is around how we can protect the data, its portability, the data loss prevention, etc., etc. So we can help you discover the data and find where it resides with our endpoint solution, and to move the data to the appropriate location. And then with the email and web solutions, we can see how the traffic flows as well in and out of the company, and provide auditing, reporting, governance, etc., etc. So we can use the adaptive DLP modules to strip out the risks, but in a way where you can still carry on inside and outside the organization. You can make it with our products a very non-intrusive way, where you can inform your users as part of an education process. You can let management know about what is happening. You can decide to block the communication altogether, or you can remove the information that is critical or that is a threat to the organization and let the business continue. We are very flexible. We've got a very good deep content inspection engine that really is the root of everything we do. The policy is very flexible. And because our solutions have been designed to understand both the content and the context in which information has been shared, you can really very quickly build a very detailed policy that is completely aligned to your organization requirements. And as you know, GDPR is coming in May next year, so the clock is ticking and you will need to start now. So I would like to thank you for your time. I hope this session was useful. There is a lot that has to be said about our products, so I'm giving you an overview of how you can use our products for DLP. There's obviously lots of things you can do for the inbound threats as well. So feel free to add any of your questions to the Q&A section now. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Julie. It was very interesting presentation. So now let's wait some questions. And I see that we received them on the email. So the first question is, what file types adaptive redaction supports?
All right, so data redaction will work with normal text files, so RTF, etc. It's all the Microsoft Office documents. It's yes, OpenOffice, and it's PDF files. That's what we're concentrating on at the moment, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to include more formats later. But we've based ourselves on the most commonly shared documents through web and email channels.
And we got other question. So, who are your closest competitors and what are your differences from them?
So closest competitors, well, you've got the big names, Symantec, Message Labs, all those big vendors. The thing is, everyone is doing things differently. So obviously, everyone does anti-spam, antivirus. That is just by default. And then after, it depends how you break down the information, what you're going to look at, and how flexible your policies are going to be as well. There are obviously the different vendors will offer different solutions. We are working with our customers to get the best solutions possible out there. So for example, from an adaptive redaction side of things, we did look at sandboxing, and sandboxing is good. The only thing is, it will create a delay because it will take time for the sandboxing solution to find out what is happening. Is it a threat? Is it good? Is it not bad? Is it bad? Etc. What we've decided to do is you can implement our products with sandboxing, but we don't offer sandboxing out of the box. So what we provide is the ability to quickly look at, does it look like a code? Yes, no. Like for example, if it's a macro, it might just be a legitimate macro, but it might also be a code, and it might not be a virus, it might be a targeted code for your company. So instead of thinking, is it good, is it bad, we're just going to remove it because it is very likely that at the end of the day, the person is going to receive, for example, the Excel document with lots and lots of numbers. They will need to have access to the data, but they won't really care about the macro itself. So we're going to strip it by default. That said, in the email solution, you are able to quarantine the original email. So you can quarantine and deliver the redacted information so that if your user says, oh, wait, I'm missing the macro and I actually really need it, you can go back and deliver the original file. So it is very flexible here, but we really base ourselves on the fact that we are going to remove anything that looks like a threat or anything that looks like a data leak as well in the case of text. We're going to just anonymize the data so that the communication is completely blocked, but we're removing what could be a problem from a DLP point of view. So basically, to answer, all vendors offer different things. We've looked at what they're doing. We've looked at what our customers wanted to see in the products, and we've tried to find the best way to implement it. And we've come up with the adaptive redaction features. But as I said, there are other things that we do better than other vendors. But we could look through that during a demo, for example, because it's more specific.
Thank you, Julie. We have also a question in the chat. Can you answer to them?
Okay, so what about password protected archive files? Okay, so I'm not too sure in what context. So basically, from a policy point of view, and if I'm getting your question right, what we would do, so basically when you install the products, first, they're really, really quick to install. And second, they come up with a starter policy. So your starter policy has got all the basic things that we would recommend you to use. So things like checking for viruses, checking for password protected files. And in the case of password protected files, sadly, we do not have access to the password. So we would always recommend that you block it because your user should be able to give you the password so that you can apply more scans, more detections to it. So in the case of password protected files, I would then obviously advise to block it and check it manually, but we'll not be able to apply redaction features. Obviously, we cannot open the file. And the same, the antivirus won't be able to open the file. So it's really a thing where you'd better check it manually there. But the products will automatically detect that. So either because you're manually blocking those files, or because if you've got a redaction feature, we're going to realize that we can't change the file, and if we can't change it, we're going to let you know about it, and we're going to put it in quarantine in the case of email, or we're going to block the communication, the download, for example, in the case of web. So I hope that answers your question. Well, about prices, you will need to contact Hermitage. I'm a technical person, so I honestly don't have any ideas. So yes, please contact Hermitage Solutions.
So I see no more questions. So thank you everyone for coming. I hope this topic was relevant to you. Thank you, Julia, of course, for the presentation and showing us a really good webinar.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure. And as I said earlier, if anyone has got any more questions or would like a demonstration of the products, please contact Hermitage Solutions so that we can arrange something and discuss your specific requirements, your concerns, and how we can help you with that. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you. Bye.